Is liberty dying where you live? Escape to Keene at freekeene.com.
With no further ado, and with apologies for the delay, I would like to introduce to you the host of this year's Direct Action panel. Last year was hosted by James Cleveland, and there was a lot of focus on Robin Hooding, and at the time that was certainly an appropriate direction to go. One of the, probably arguably the most prolific Robin Hooder is Garret Ean. He's hit the streets for I don't know how many hundreds of hours, but I don't know if it's over 1,000, but it's a lot. He's been out more often than I think anyone else, and is very, very dedicated to it, and obviously is very recognizable, and most people love to see him on the streets, although it's been a storied history of various different interactions with people in reality. He's got an interesting panel here, and I will let him do the introductions. Garret, welcome back to Keenevention, and thanks for hosting the Direct Action panel. Good morning.
Thank you, Ian. Thank you, everybody, for showing up. This is the Direct Action panel, where we will be focusing not specifically on all types of activism, but specifically on direct action, things that are intended to make a specific difference through a specific act. So, in defining activism, it could be defined as efforts to promote, impede, or direct social, political, or environmental change. That doesn't necessarily have a specific goal in mind. It's more of a general goal. But with direct action, the idea is that if one is creative, if one thinks outside the box, that through a single action or a series of actions by people, that an immediate change, a measurable change, could be seen from that sort of action. So to introduce the panelists that we have here today, first we have Robert Mathias. He's a recent mover to Manchester from the Chicago area. And while he may not be known for doing a lot of direct action himself, he's been great at covering and keeping up with what's going on, not just here in New Hampshire, but around the country and in some cases around the world. Next up, we have Beth Grunewald, who is involved with Occupy Wall Street and Occupy New Hampshire. Took part in a series of actions with both of those groups, and in fact, seen the inside of police cars and jailhouses in doing those activities. And someone who also shares some of those experiences is Matt Richards, who is also involved with Occupy New Hampshire. Was arrested through a few acts of civil disobedience. A memorable one was at a presidential debate in Concord, in which he tried to get into the event himself to take part in an action that others had also tried to get involved with. He was the only one arrested. And you were also arrested recently, I believe, at environmental action in New York.
Flood Wall Street in New York. Yeah.
Cool. So, yeah, it's I'm really excited about the panel that we have here and hearing their stories. So, I think we'll begin with. I'd like for the panelists to introduce themselves and what's inspired them to get involved with activism. So, we'll begin with you, Rob. What was your inspiration to getting involved with activism and covering others' activities?
Well, my huge inspiration. Honestly, it was from when I signed the intent to move. Because as soon as I signed the intent to move here, that's when I knew I was going to be active. But what inspired me to sign that was Derek J's victimless crime spree, and that inspired me because it showed that there's people that are going out and just doing something, like working toward freedom in our lifetime, not just talking about it, not just being a keyboard warrior, actually going out, opening your front door, leaving it, and going out and doing something, and seeing that in film, seeing that actually taking place, inspired me to do whatever I can here to try to do the same and push it forward to get other people to, make that mental decision to walk out the door and also be active in their life for liberty.
Beth, what inspired you or what got you started into activism?
I've always been a loudmouth. Wait, is it not on? Okay. I've always been kind of a loudmouth, which is so I've always been kind of a loudmouth. Ironically, that didn't work. And so on some level, I've always been attracted to people who speak out or do things that other people don't necessarily find acceptable, but are for a good cause. And I guess my biggest inspiration when I was younger is when I took a women's history course and learned about all these fantastic people in history who've had tubes shoved down their throat because they were arrested for protesting, a president who was fighting for democracy abroad but not at home, and got women's right to vote by being persistent. So I've been inspired by that, and just anybody who's not willing to accept what they shouldn't accept.
Yeah, I was actually going to say something similar to along what Beth said. I'm actually a history major, and I've noticed that some of the biggest changes in America have come from civil disobedience and direct action, and from like the abolitionist movement, people actually disobeying the government, freeing the slaves. What she said about the women's rights movement, the civil rights movement, would have been what I was really recently inspired by before I joined the Occupy movement was the revolutions in Tahrir in Tunisia, and even before that, the People's Power Revolution in the Philippines, just people really banding together and defying the government in these like really peaceful acts of civil disobedience and actually like gaining a new government, a new system just from doing that, and that really inspired me.
Civil disobedience and direct action often go hand in hand. Almost all civil disobedience is a form of direct action, but that's not to say that direct action has to be civil disobedience. It doesn't necessarily have to be illegal. But as has been mentioned with some of the panelists, they have been arrested for their actions. So I guess starting with Matt, moving this way, could you discuss the way in which you view civil disobedience as a form of direct action, and what the effect was?
Well, in New Hampshire, we decided to build this model democracy in a park. That's basically what Occupy New Hampshire was. We decided we're going to sit in this park, and we are not going to leave, and we're going to show people like what democracy is supposed to look like, what people getting together and actually discussing issues should look like. Like, we made the change that we wanted to see by claiming public space and using it to form micro-society within society. We had food donations and clothing donations that we would give to the homeless population, and we really highlighted the struggles that people in Manchester faced by being civil disobedient. And we also highlighted the national issues of homelessness and inequality and denial of our freedoms and liberties and our right to protest and all these sorts of things. We decided to make those issues center because the media wasn't covering them. They're owned by 5 national corporations who want them to only cover things that aren't as disobedient. So we decided to do that, and we were successful for 5 days. We actually were able to live without the government like providing anything for us. We were able to have like our own society. Like we learned that we can do things ourselves, and we don't really need the government to do it. And we ended up getting arrested on the 5th day. Mayor Gatsis decided to order the police department to vacate us, and that's when some of us decided to stay in the park and get arrested. I decided to stay in the park because we had built something beautiful, and I felt that if I had chosen to leave, that would have sent a message that we only have the right to protest when it is convenient to those in power, only in a certain time and place, and I didn't think that was right. And that's why I went so far in that civil disobedience.
One thing that brings to mind is the fact that your civil disobedience was a form of free speech activism, and that you were trying to protect your right to occupy a space, to express yourself in a space. And at the same time, within that expression, there was so much more going on at the camp with trying to make a sustainable energy and keep everyone fed, et cetera. Some of the issues that society has an issue reaching sometimes. So Beth, I know that you've been arrested at events. I don't know if it was intentional or not, but would you say that your actions have been civil disobedience, or were you trying to do direct action and just got caught up in in police issues?
So I was also with Matt with Occupy New Hampshire, and I also spent some time in Occupy I was involved with Occupy New Hampshire with Matt, and I also spent time in Occupy Providence doing similar activities, and they didn't get shut down. They were actually really successful in getting a day shelter in exchange for them leaving their park. And my arrest with Occupy New Hampshire was a conscious choice. I believe that public parks are our commons, and our commons are disappearing. We don't have a right to public space, and that's ridiculous in my opinion. And so that was a choice. And I went to the Occupy Wall Street first year anniversary, which was September 17th of 2012. And I was participating in various marches that they had, and I had only been there about an hour. I turned around to take a picture of something, and they were very strategic and I guess smart in how they were getting rid of protesters that day, is that they decided to do snatch and grabs of small groups of people as opposed to large groups. And so I turned around and a man was being handcuffed for I don't even know why, and I yelled at the cop, "Why are you arresting this man?" And they pushed me against a wall and I was arrested. I spent 36 hours in jail. I was denied water until almost midnight. I got arrested at like 9 in the morning. I got sent to the hospital, and like for 6 months after, my thumb was numb. That was not intentional. I would consider that a kidnapping if we want to go to an extreme of what that was. I don't think that they had a right to take any of us for walking on a sidewalk, but which is what I was charged with, was obstructing a sidewalk and interfering with an officer's business. So that has a very different feeling and sits very differently in my mind than something that was an intentional, like I had a pristine arrest record. Like I had never been arrested but prior to the New Hampshire encampment. And I chose to like give that away because that, like being in a public space and saying, you know, this is my freedom of speech and I have every right to be here when I want to, and I'm here for political reasons. Like I have a constitutional right to be here is very different than being taken during a march.
Rob, do you have like a particular story about a form of direct action or civil dis that you think like either was very successful or very poorly done and not successful?
In my experience that I've done, or just in general?
What you've observed as a media personality.
I would say here definitely direct action in regards to cop blocking is, in my opinion, very successful. Just seeing it firsthand in Manchester, because like in Manchester, there's always a lot of people that come out in support of cop blocking DUI checkpoint, where you get, there's a couple nights where there's 30 or 40, even more so, of us cop blocking this DUI checkpoint, and it's more than just that. Like you have people doing different things. Like there's people that are filming, and I'm usually out there filming it. But there's people like trying to direct traffic away from it. You got people going along the bar scene handing out cop block literature. And I remember walking down Elm with and she was holding a sign that said DUI checkpoint and bridge, and just walking down, and all these people like, you know, like high-fiving us, shaking our hand, like knowing what they're cop blocking, you know, they're trying to help us. And it's one of those direct actions where it's become the status quo, the normal thing, that people know what it is and they're appreciative of it. Just by going out and doing those things, people are aware of the police and how they're not really there to help us. And if no one went out and did direct action in regards to just cop blocking a DUI checkpoint or any other kind of cop blocking, they wouldn't put that in their mind that, you know, it's okay to stand up to the police.
So a good point has been brought up, I guess, the contrast between what we've come to expect from police in a place like New Hampshire versus a place like New York City, where Beth, of course, describes how unreasonable, nearly torturous, that sounds like the police were in that instance, as opposed to in Manchester when Occupy New Hampshire was broken up, how very conscious of people's like rights they were and due process, etc.
The police actually came to some of our general assemblies, which was basically our form of like a town hall meeting, like a democratic process. They would come, they would like use the hand signals and like talk to us, and like I don't like support police as an institution itself in enforcing corrupt laws of the state, but they were much more respectful than the police in New York. We actually, Beth was actually really sarcastic with one of them, like on the night we were arrested. That she's like, do you want us to form a line? And then like they all got in line for the police. So we ended up with an editorial in the newspaper that said, "Occupy New Hampshire, too polite for its own good." Because it was just a really different atmosphere. It was just really cordial, despite this bizarre violation of constitutional right of like our right to assemble that was happening. So I thought that was interesting, the contrast.
One way to look at the different ways Occupy, either New Hampshire or Wall Street or across the country, made an impact was whether the focus was on local issues or state or national issues. One could say that occupying the park was a local issue in that the city of Manchester is the one enforcing this ordinance, where with Occupy Wall Street there was a lot of focus on the national and I'd say international business that was occurring that was disrupting people's lives. Starting with Rob, do you think that it's what would you say is like the most effective focus for one's activism, local, state, national, international, or do you have any advice or like particular ones how to focus on them?
My opinion, if you're going to do any kind of direct action or kind of activism in general, do it what is that you feel that you're passionate about, that you really want. Don't do something that you think is a good idea, but you're not really that passionate about it, because you're just like with anything in life, if you're not passionate about what you're doing, you probably shouldn't be doing it. Do it, it makes you, like, drives your passion, what is you really love and care about, and go after that issue, that topic, that activism. I mean, for me, I try to dabble in everything because I'm so into all this, but I do have some focuses that I work on a lot more than I do on others. But whatever your passion is, that's what you should go after.
Yeah, I would definitely repeat that doing what you love is way more important than doing what you necessarily think is right, but you don't necessarily believe in or care about so much. The word glocal has entered my vocabulary this past year, and what is local is global. So finding causes that you're passionate about that make direct effects locally but also ripple out globally are really important. Like fighting the militarization of police, very important, because that spreads out. That's saying that this culture of having armies in our towns is not okay. Having tanks rolling through anyone's city is not okay. Yeah, so connecting something locally to globally, I would think is important.
So with one of your arrests, Matt, I'd say at the debate in Concord, in a sense that was a sort of a national action since it was focused on a presidential debate. In a sense, some would say it was very successful because of the news coverage that came out of this. One person was trying to get in to disrupt this debate. Could you give us a little background on that incident and the national impact of that?
Yeah, I'm not actually sure if that was a successful action. Actually, that might be one of my examples of one that didn't quite pan out how we hoped. We were planning. Okay, so I'll start from the beginning. It was the primaries in 2012. It was a televised debate of NBC, like between the Republican candidates, and the like media was only like letting certain people in and taking like pre-screened questions, and we just like really wanted to highlight the fact that like this is not a real debate. It's kind of like a sham that all of these politicians are agreeing to only have people ask them these questions that don't really impact us. So one of my friends two of my friends were actually ushers at the event, and they were planning to open the back door for us so that we could get in. We could like hang a banner, like they were undercover, and I guess it didn't end up working because like the security was stronger than we thought, and I tried to dive for the door and hold it open and have other people follow, but like no one followed me. I was the only one who ran. We needed, for that type of action, you definitely need more planning beforehand. That's what that taught me, is that you need to really surveil the area, get like a real sense of what logistically you'll be able to do.
As opposed to, I'm aware of at least one event that was shut down by Occupy New Hampshire because there were more people there than there were supporters. There was a Newt Gingrich fundraiser that I recall being canceled.
There was actually a Rick Santorum town hall meeting at Belmont Hall where there were too many people that came, so we had him go outside, and he was against this brick wall, and then he was trying to talk, and everyone just kept shouting things at him like the whole time, and then he couldn't leave. So he couldn't, it was like really hilarious because he couldn't like really talk, but I thought that was interesting. We have done a lot of direct action that hasn't been civil disobedience per se. We have this thing called the People's Microphone in the Occupy movement. It started in New York because they don't have bullhorns. It's not legal to use a bullhorn in New York. So people will say mic check, and then everyone in the crowd will repeat what you're saying. And we eventually evolved this from a communication tactic from between ourselves to an interruption tactic of politicians. And we ended up using it at all kinds of events that only had pre-screened questions so that we could ask questions, whether it was Newt Gingrich, I think he was one, and we actually mic checked President Obama at Central High School and asked him about like the police like beating up protesters like everywhere across the country and why he's not saying anything about it. And we didn't get arrested for any of it, but it was direct action because we interrupted the process as usual by doing something direct.
One thing to think of with direct action is that sometimes it's sustainable. It's something that could be done all the time. I think Robin Hooding is an example of a direct action that you can do as long as there's parking enforcers, monitoring the police. You can do that as long as there's police out on the street. You can go be effective with a camera. But some of the things we've talked about today have been opportunistic. When there's a presidential debate, when these political leaders are in town or assembled in a certain place where they're accessible. I was wondering if the panelists have a sort of idea for making an activism that's not just like based on opportunity, but like sustainability. If there's something that as a group, like Occupy New Hampshire has sort of, I'd say, like decentralized it completely to this point. People are doing their own independent things. But as far as sustainability, like sustaining networks, do you guys have any like perspective on that? Like, because you know, every so once in a while, the same group of people gets together for a good event. I guess it's a very vague question, but.
Can you be a little bit more specific?
I'd say like how would you really like sustain how is it sustainable for like a group of people? I guess it hasn't really been, as Occupy is sort of like dissolved, but I guess I'd say like what comes out of like the decentralization, like what is it, I guess, that could bring people back together? Is it like the opportunity needs to recreate itself? We do have the primaries coming up soon. Are there any plans for that?
I plan to troll some of the politicians during the primaries. I want to have fun with it. That's just me, though. I want to have fun going out, and I mean, I'm sure I'll take place in some sort of direct action or something will pop. There's always something in this state that comes up that you can go active with, but I want to have some fun too, because at the same time, I don't agree with their rule over me, and I don't want to go straight negative or whatnot. I want to make it fun and entertaining, and I plan to do some stuff like that. But that's just because I want to have fun doing it.
One of the organizations that I'm working with, organization. And a little bit more formal than Occupy New Hampshire is the New Hampshire Rebellion. And last year they walked from Dixville, which is where the first ballot is cast in the United States, down to Nashua, to get people a little less apathetic about money in politics and getting it out, because you can't really do anything as long as money is the central driving force of democracy, or representative democracy, or government in general. And so this year in January, we're walking from Keene to Concord, from Dixville to Concord, from Portsmouth to Concord, from Nashua to Concord in the middle of January, which is to fight that apathy and get people involved for the next big primary. With that organization, it's a lot of outreach and getting people involved, and you know, there are people that are outraged about money in politics, which was a huge thing with Occupy. Getting them upset again, but trying to organize them in a much more, getting them together and in a much more organized way. And there are different organizations that intend to harass the politicians again during the primaries. Occupy New Hampshire, we've discussed, some of us have discussed reoccupying the 2014 primaries, and I think that that's something that we're definitely going to do. The New Hampshire Rebellion folks are teaming up with different organizations in the state to train folks to bird dog candidates, so like how to strategically question them about different issues, because money in politics relates to everything. You can't have a minimal government without getting money out. So how does it relate to healthcare? How does it relate to, the American Friends Service Committee is focused on the militarization of police and prison systems, like, because lobbyists for prisons have such a big influence in the government. Like how do we frame, their questions are going to be specifically framed about that. So the New Hampshire Rebellion is focused on doing, gathering folks into the conversation and then having their respective issues focused on bird dogging candidates.
Should I answer your original question?
Sure.
Okay. No, it's okay. So I think when we talk about decentralizing of movements and then losing steam, I think that's a problem with like all activism and not just direct action in particular.
I think burnt out.
I think Occupy did burn out. I think people were overworking themselves too much. It also cannibalized itself in a pretty spectacular fashion that was lampooned by the Colbert Report. But I've noticed that when you don't have a very visible common enemy, people tend to turn against each other and they lose sight of the bigger picture. I think that's part of the reason why direct action is so important, because you need to feel like you're doing something for a movement to be cohesive. It can't just be fundraising activities or getting together and talking about things. You need to actually feel like you're doing something in the world to be motivated enough to keep doing it.
Looking back at Occupy New Hampshire's activities and having disrupted political events, was there anything that you guys feel, whether or not it was you yourselves, and you don't have to name names, where an action either crossed a line, whether it was a legal line or a moral line, and is there a way to prevent sort of like a mob from forming, so to speak, when uniting people around things that upset people, things that, you know, make people emotional? Whoever wants to take that one first.
You guys are the experts over here. You guys are the experts, not me. You gotta tackle that. I'm learning at this point.
You're the only rioter in Keene in New Hampshire.
Fucking strong.
Mob mentality exists everywhere and it sucks. The specific actions that I felt violated about, and I would think that Matt agrees with me, is that some particular individuals thought that it would be okay to incorporate Occupy New Hampshire, which is like ironic and stupid. And in the process, they were explicitly excluding groups of people, and I found that incredibly offensive. I think in our case with Occupy New Hampshire, because I would still call myself an occupier, and I believe Matt would still call himself one, and we have friends that still would, and we still consider ourselves part of this like ephemeral Occupy group.
Occupy.
It's just trying to maintain like your core group, like just keep your connections. And if people are going to form their own mob faction, just like really insist, you know, they do not represent what this group is supposed to represent, and just hold firm to your beliefs. And
I know like there were one of the things that people weren't approving of were specific individuals meeting with the police and not like having it be public, like behind our backs, and making deals with them. I've noticed like a lot of that type of stuff going on, other than just the people trying to exclude others. I don't think we actually, and fortunately, I've never been to an action itself that I felt crossed a moral line. So I consider myself lucky because of that.
Well, one good thing about New Hampshire activism is I'm not aware of any like smashing of windows or, you know, breaking of things as in the course of Occupy's activities. Not so much the case from some of the things you see from Occupy Oakland. I know there's been some videos, but Rob, do you have any do you feel anywhere that you've seen activism, whether here in New Hampshire or elsewhere, that you felt has like gone astray of where it was supposed to begin?
Has gone astray. I would, from the outside, 'cause I'm not an occupier, I was on board at first with a lot of the Occupy movement when it first started, but it seemed like it was too many issues at once. And like I can get behind a couple things, but there's so many other stuff on there. It wasn't a specific thing. And that's where I thought like the Occupy kind of went astray and lost steam, because it came out against, a lot of it was against the banking system and whatnot. And I absolutely agree. I mean, as a libertarian, I mean, I'm coming from kind of sometimes maybe the other side of the fence, but I'm completely agreeing with it. And I was definitely on board, but there were so many other issues, like everything under the sun seemed to be on the Occupy plate at one point. And that was, I wanted to see Occupy like succeed, and I wanted to see that rise up that was happening in the Middle East happening here. I was for it, but it had to be more specific on certain issues, because you'd get more broad appeal if it's just on that. When the more you add all these different things underneath under the same banner, like for me, I didn't take part because there's so much stuff going on that the issues, like I was in Chicago at the time, and I knew a couple of people that were going to the Chicago Occupy protests, and I agree with them about 30% of it, but they had so much stuff on there in regards to the welfare state and whatnot that I just couldn't go along with. But if they stuck with just like the Federal Reserve System, the banking system, and corporatism, I would have been right there on the street with them.
One thing that's been brought up is exclusivity versus inclusivity, and the exclusive nature of incorporating something and putting certain people's name on a list as the heads of it, etc. Do you feel as though there's a certain need to have some level of exclusivity, or with activism is inclusivity always the way to go? I guess the idea is like if one is skeptical of certain people, skeptical of their motives, whether or not they're really interested in the cause, whether or not they're going to be disruptive. Do any of the panelists feel that there's a point where you or a movement you've been involved with has, other than what's been mentioned, been too exclusive and or conversely too inclusive?
Too exclusive. I would actually make the argument that sometimes the Free State project's too exclusive. I think that I've noticed that like sometimes people have such a huge philosophical, like we need just these specific philosophical people to move here, and I I kind of have a little bit of a disagreement with that, because if they're open to the idea of liberty or whatnot, they come here. It's like an echo chamber. You will evolve philosophically as a human being where you'll get to that point. But at least bringing people in is a better idea, like welcoming them, even if they have some different viewpoints. But if you're mostly on the same page, bring them in. But sometimes I feel that it's not so much like, people really pushing hard on the Free State Project, but like I have noticed people in the community where because they've been here, they're already there, and they kind of forget that they weren't always there to begin with as well. And that's one example that I've witnessed of where I wish it was more not as exclusive and more reaching out across boundaries, across philosophical viewpoints.
So I think it's incredibly hard to build a broad-based social movement without being inclusive of people with a lot of views. A lot of what certain people in Occupy were doing, like talking about excluding Free Staters, or even like a Free Stater ban, like I heard that floated around, and I was like dead set against it, because I think we need the best ideas from everyone. But can I talk about like one specific danger of inclusivity? So I want to talk about agent provocateurs and to be wary of them, because I told you that I was involved in a climate action called Flood Wall Street in New York, and the goal, which we succeeded at, was to get 2,000 individuals to shut down a portion of the stock exchange until the bell closed, to send awareness about climate change. And when we got to the march that morning, we noticed we noticed there was this man with a walkie-talkie who was like asking, "Oh, where do you want to march?" And then we were just kind of giving vague answers. And then he kind of walked away, and he was still within earshot, and he was saying, "Yeah, I need 2 officers at the corner of this." And then he's like, he saw us, he saw that we could hear him, and then he's like, "In the office, is the shed still working?" And it was like really obvious that he was an agent provocateur, but there were like some less obvious ones. Like we couldn't get to parts of the actual stock exchange because there were blockades around them, and the police were pepper spraying people. But we ended up closing down a portion of Broadway Street, like next to the famous Wall Street Bull statue, and there was this man who got up and said, "Oh, the police are letting us walk on Wall Street. We need to all get up, and we need to go to Wall Street," and we realized we stayed seated because we realized that the police were trying to divide us. They were trying to get us away from cameras. And because we stayed still, they weren't able to arrest us because they didn't have enough visibility of the whole crowd. They didn't have like the logistics to do it with that many people yet. They had to wait until later in the day to arrest people because we decided not to divide. So I think people should always be cautious of who they accept into their activism circles, even while being inclusive. You shouldn't automatically assume someone is agent provocateur or be because that can cause its own problems. But you should definitely be wary.
Well, like the running joke in like the liberty community, at least, is like, you play the game, who's the Fed, and for me, anyone that's advocating violence, I don't want to associate with that comes in, because you can't really trust anyone in that point. And for me, I don't say or do anything that I wouldn't say to a Fed anyway. So even if there is a Fed, come on board. Like I don't say anything or do anything that would cause them to have concern for me, to be a spy or to be that agent provocateur. Like I treat everyone as if they are, and I act appropriately for me.
I guess one way of considering the exclusivity versus inclusivity, if one's partaking in an action like Matt had mentioned with the debate, obviously you don't want to publicly broadcast that's going to be going on. Security will be tighter, it won't happen. But of course you do want people in the know to be able to take part. So I guess there's a little bit of a publicity versus keep something hush like line that one needs to constantly be aware of.
So we actually developed a system, I'm not sure how this technologically worked, where the occupiers themselves had a code they could text on their cell phone that would send a message out to every occupier involved in the action, and that's how everyone in Snake Pit became involved. And we did like this very word of mouth thing where we talked to different people. And I was talking to Cecilia, who was one of my really good friends from Occupy, who was involved in the Philippines revolution before they had the internet or cell phones or anything. And she was explaining how students would build these really elaborate networks to relay messages to each other to keep like participating. So I think we need to do more work into developing those systems. If we're going to be serious about certain types of action, we need to plan those types of technological solutions in advance.
When there's a diversity of people with a diversity of ideas, such as Occupy, that had different goals, how is it that any of you found that people were united under a single issue or a single cause? Do you think that it was more when opportunities would present themselves, or was there any sort of direction to unite people, or was it based on sort of a something that was a current event? So I guess what I'm saying, like, what is it exactly that you would say like motivated people to get behind specific actions?
Well, sometimes I'd just yell out. Sometimes we'd just be in the middle of the park, and I'd ask, "Hey, I'd yell out, "Hey, who wants to go march on that bank?" And then people would join me. Like, there's kind of a spontaneous about it that's really creative and refreshing. I don't know if that's what you're asking. Do you feel that direct action sort of requires a spark, or that motivating people, or like the Occupy movement required a spark if there was a particular event that motivated it, or was it a general sense of dissatisfaction of people?
I mean, obviously it starts with dissatisfaction, but the most successful events that we had were fun. Everyone likes to have fun. We did a Move the Money campaign. We set up at a major intersection, several major intersections on different days, like an ATM, and you'd look like you take money from the bank and move it to a credit union. And that was really fun because everybody's like running across major traffic lines, and we had events where people would just bring instruments and play, and those were a lot more lively and exciting.
A question about a sort of passive form of direct action. Videotaping in some places can be illegal, recording audio. Have any of you been in a situation where a passive activity such as videotaping or using a camera led to some sort of confrontation? I have, since I've gotten here, I try to film as much as I can. I'm not you, so you definitely you're beating me to it, but no, I try to film as much as I can. I've had multiple altercations where I haven't been arrested, knock on wood, but if I ever get arrested, it's going to be for filming. I know that's the thing I'll probably be arrested for more than anything else. I don't try to do anything illegal as it is, but I know at some point I will probably be arrested for filming. I've done multiple things filming-wise since I've been here, where I did definitely feel pressured and intimidated by people calling themselves the police. Back in April, I participated in an open carry / free speech event at the Manchester airport. I was the person filming that, and we had a police escort the whole time, and which was interesting because like they followed us everywhere. I mean, like obviously we weren't going to do anything. They knew that from the get-go, but they didn't want us there. Later that day,
we ended up actually, because we're kind of on a high of doing activism, like we're driving, all of a sudden these squad cars pull ahead of us. And like, well, we have to get out and cop block that because we're doing activism today. We kind of have to, and we go out there and start filming. And when we're filming, apparently I was filming maybe an undercover car. I don't know, but a sergeant of the Manch PD like literally gets in my face and pushes me away, so I couldn't film the car that I was filming. There's other times where. During a DUI checkpoint, there was a person that was arrested for simply honking in support of the people doing the checkpoint. And me, Derek, and Neil, we went up to the jail that's literally like a block away. I mean, like from where it is from Elm. And the police were very intimidating. They came up, flashing their lights at us. And, we were at the door that we called to ask where to go. And we were at the right door. And they come up, flash their lights in front of us. And they're like very aggressive in how they're telling us to leave. Like, they wouldn't answer whether or not it was an order or not, but they were like insisting. They also... Then they decided to pull away and start like stalking us, like filming us from a distance. And instead of like the police are supposed to be there to help serve and protect, and I felt like as if like they're spying and intimidating me to go away. And there's another point later that night, I went with Neil and Joelle into the Valley Street police station. Both Neil and Joelle were open carrying, and I'm in there filming. We were kicked out of there, but at the same time, I know like people have been arrested for filming stuff like that as well. I have felt, that's my big thing is I feel like I can film wherever I want to film. I should be able to capture my life no matter where it takes me, no matter what, what's I'm looking for. Just because I walk through some sort of threshold of a door and somehow laws change, or that I can't record my interactions because I went through some magic door, it just seems ridiculous. So I don't care where I am, I should be able to record my existence regardless of what people think. I know a lot of people go against the whole privacy thing on that, but for me, it's my life. I get to be able to record my life. But yeah, I always feel as if like if I ever do get arrested, it's going to be for filming, because sometimes people don't like being recorded. But when it's someone that represents the state, when they're the authority figure, quote unquote, I should be able to question them no matter where they are.
So I think if you're doing any sort of passive civil disobedience and you don't want to get arrested, you need to behave impeccably. You need to not even give the appearance of like aggression or rudeness, because the cops will find a reason
last
to
thing you want to do is give them a reason.
I was in Bradford for an Occupy meeting of some sort, and there was this traffic stop I was filming, and there was this cop the first day on the job, and because I kind of ran across the street so I could get better view, he literally tried to arrest me for jaywalking. He like warned me that he would arrest me for jaywalking, like if I didn't stop filming.
Well, it's funny how because one is filming, they then are told that they may be jaywalking or they may have to move with or without a video camera. We see different effects. I could contrast that, though, with here in Keene recently when the riots were going on during Pumpkin Fest. Myself and another person who are very well known to the police were filming and getting much closer to them than they would allow others to get. So I believe there's a sense in which there becomes a trade-off with the camera. The authorities are afraid of it at first, but the more they're around it, the more they realize that they need to behave in front of it. Otherwise, they're going to appear as authoritarian as they act if they do so. Sure. Another question as we've talked about, people have been arrested in the past, either intentionally or unintentionally in the course of direct actions. Do you feel as though civil disobedience is a very effective tactic that should be employed more, or is there a feeling that direct action that cannot be critiqued by the legal system or attacked by the police is more effective or more sustainable?
I actually think direct action is the most efficient type of activism you can do, because as opposed to politics where you need a majority kind of to get along, you could have like a minority of the population do something very radical, like blocking a pipeline of some sort, or in Tahrir they had 2 million people, but they didn't need half the population to sit in Tahrir Square. They only needed that many. If there's a very visible minority of people, sizable minority of people participating in direct action, that is actually the most effective way you can change something.
Are there any plans for civil disobedience in the future from any of you?
I'll probably take part in a 420 rally, but that'd be the extent of like my civil disobedience. I'll definitely cover civil disobedience for sure, but for me, like everyone has to choose their battle. Like everyone has like their activism, their what they're passionate for. But everyone has pick and choose the battles that they're willing to pick, especially in regards to civil disobedience. And I have something I would definitely stand up for, especially like I wouldn't turn off my camera if anyone ever asked me. That's my point. That's my issue. But for me, besides those things, I don't have any in plans at the moment.
Not directly. Like, I don't necessarily plan to be disobedient. It's just a situation that arises. Like, when it arises, it's much more organic for me. And yeah, I mean, the direct action that I'm involved with, like I mentioned earlier, is New Hampshire Rebellion, which is like nonpartisan walk. But since it's legal to walk the streets of New Hampshire, that's not necessarily being disobedient, although it may piss some people off because we're a bunch of people in the road. So, yeah.
I think different activists have very different types of skills. Some people are better medics, some people are better lawyers, some people are better organizers. They can really talk to people, call people, like get them really involved. I have always sucked at organizing. I only got involved in Occupy and Flood Wall Street because someone else who was an organizer invited me. My types of skills are I'm very good at speaking to large crowds of people. I'm good at writing. I'm good at rushing police barricades because I have a lot of adrenaline. So I think it's important to recognize those skills. So I don't have anything planned, but if some other people are organizing something, I'm usually like the first person to jump on board and like try to do something with them.
As a media personality, Rob, I'm sure you think it's important to remain visible, to remain keeping up with what's active. Do any of the panelists feel as though doing more, I guess I could say clandestine activity is like effective? Because Occupy, of course, had plenty of meetings. I'm sure there were a lot more planning hours that went into things. And sure. So I guess that brings up a good point of like how does one balance the like it's been mentioned that some activities should have had a little bit more planning, and then some things I'm sure were over planned. Is there a way to find a happy medium with a large group as far as planning goes?
You really need to delegate and make sure you're not the only person doing something, because there were certain people who became like pillars of Occupy that were like doing all kinds of work and like not resting. And if you're gonna do that type of thing, you really need to distribute the work in a reasonable fashion. You need to not go for every single thing you could do, but do the most effective. Spend your resources and time in the most effective means possible to create change. Otherwise, your message will be diluted.
Well, I think you can definitely have actually really do plan things out. If you want to be a little bit clandestine, that's fine. But once you actually start operating, doing whatever it is you did plan, you need to be as open as possible. Like for me, like I make a joke about this, but it's true. Like I didn't come here to hide, but like, you know, if you're going to do something, if you're doing activism, you want people to know about it. You want the world to know about it, and there's no reason to hide or be really clandestine, like not in the planning stages or anything like that. You want as many people to know about what you're doing, and you want them to know exactly what you're doing, and you want more support. And you're not going to get more support if you don't tell anyone or you're hiding what's going on. And in all honesty, if you're doing that on top, it makes it look like that's an issue, that you have ulterior motives because you're not being open and fully honest with what you're doing.
And this is a question that kind of stems from like the focus of Occupy. Do you think that a focus should be placed more upon businesses that are getting governmental protection, or against the state that is giving those sorts of companies that are either polluting or abusing people's rights? How exactly do you think things should be focused in the future compared to how they've been focused in the past?
I think there's a huge alliance of state and corporate power. I think the lobbyists, they bribe congressmen to give themselves protections, to buy themselves more contracts. Obviously, the focus can't just be on one part of this system that's interlocking. Does that make sense?
Anyone else have ideas on that one?
Repeat the question again.
Is there enough of a focus on, I'd say, like what businesses are doing to abuse human rights, or the lack of liability they have for that, versus focus on the state?
Well, I like to, I mean, for me, it's, again, that's something that obviously you pick and choose your battles. From my background, I don't want to go after businesses per se. I'd rather focus my energy on the state than any business. Unless a business is really doing something horribly wrong, then yes, absolutely. But I try to focus my energy more on the people that control that business, which is really the state. So for me, I think there should always be in a lot of activism, something regarding the state in that situation, and with businesses should be involved. But that's my own bias, though.
Do any of you have concerns about being associated with being either radical or out of touch in partaking in sort of alternative activities? And
Yes.
how exactly do you either combat or respond to that?
Okay. I use my real name. I'm on the internet. I'm not hiding. I'm out there. I'm open. 2 weeks ago, I quit my job. I had to go job hunting. And I Googled myself. And I have a common name, so my normal Google stuff, like me actually doesn't come up like page 3. There's like there's like Olympian and like politicians and stuff like that, and business people that have my name. However, I Google my name and I put NH next to it. Everything I've done since I got here came up, and I freaked out for like a couple hours. I was just like sitting there. I'm like, oh God, how am I going to get a job? All they got to do is Google me. Like, you know, I don't know if like, you know, a company wants to hire me as a, you know, this like crazy guy that's on the internet talking about activism and secession and stuff like that. Yeah, that scared me a little bit. It's definitely a thing. Thankfully, got a job after 3 days of looking, so you know, that was actually fantastic. I didn't have to look very hard. Actually, I had 2 jobs like immediate, like that week. But it's definitely a fear. But at the end of the day, I don't want to hide who I am as a human being, and I want to do whatever I can openly and be public about what I'm doing. And I originally, when I started doing this, I was using an alias online, and I couldn't with Facebook and stuff like that. And I found, like, you know what, it was liberating just to use my real name, who I am. And it's kind of like let the chips fall where it goes. Like, since I've come out here, I've been on this. It's like if I set my heart to what I want to do, things happen for me. I know it sounds spiritual or whatnot, but it's definitely a concern. But I know, my time is short, and I'm going to do whatever I can and not worry about the consequence in regards to not finding work or whatnot, because I feel like that's going to happen as long as I apply myself. As long as you put your foot forward, things are going to happen for you, regardless of what your political views are. But no, it's definitely it's a fear of mine. I wonder with my new job at what point they're going to have that conversation with me and how I would interact. I actually had a whole thing planned about, like, in an interview, if they actually brought it up in the conversation, like what my sales pitch would be in regards to, like, what I do. But yes, firsthand experience, it freaks me out when I see all this stuff with my name on Google, yeah.
So do either of you avoid the radical label, or do you embrace it?
I don't consider myself a radical necessarily.
Neither do I.
So, I mean, people have called me that for either things I've said or things I've done. And in my opinion, if you're going to write me off because I got arrested in a park, you're the radical. And, if it's just about having conversations with people and walking them through the rationalization of your decisions, just communicating. And, as far as jobs go, like, if they're not willing to talk to you about your political beliefs or behaviors, they're probably not someone we want to work with, or I want to work with.
Well, my dream would be to have my own agorist business, work for myself or whatnot, and not have to rely on getting a job somewhere, but I'm not there yet. Hopefully I will be at some point. For me, I wouldn't, if they ask, I'll be honest with them, and I don't consider myself a radical. I would just say, like, well, these are my views, and I'm very passionate about it, and if you want to have any questions, I'll gladly explain it, but just like how you would talk to a normal person, I would talk to them. But yeah, if they're very against whatever I'm doing, I would just find work somewhere else, because again, for me, if I put my foot forward and I start doing what I want to do, doors open for you. And you just got to apply yourself.
I do consider myself a radical anarchist, and I am hugely concerned that I am so outside what the mainstream of the population views, not for my own sake, but because it is so harder to convince someone of something who comes from a different background than you. One of the biggest wake-up calls in my life was when I was in my jury trial with Beth Grunewald over Occupy, and the jury unanimously declared us guilty of criminally trespassing in a public park in 45 minutes, even after the lawyer explained nullification to them and, like, exactly how they're supposed to do the case. And when Daryl interviewed one of the jurors after, they said that the reason they did it was because the law is the law, and that they would have convicted Martin Luther King and Gandhi too. And that just made me, like, so concerned about, like, how much I guess corporate media brainwashing to respect authority, to always show deference to the law, has seeped into the country, and how difficult it is going to make civil disobedience become a cultural norm. I think what Garret in particular is doing with the Robin Hooding is a great idea, because it really elevates the public image of civil disobedience. It does things that people want to see. They don't want to see their parking meters. They don't want to get a huge ticket from the state. They just want their parking meters to be paid off. I think if we do those types of actions one by one, we will build a culture of civil disobedience, and we really need to rebuild that, because we haven't had that since, I think, at least the 60s or the 70s, because people have really been brainwashed into accepting authority. I've found in my own life, I'm afraid of living in a bubble, so I intentionally make sure to participate in activities I would not normally, whether it's joining a knitting club or a book club or, like, I don't know, some library organization, just really talk to people who are different than me and explain my views in a respectful way without denigrating theirs. Because I think that's the way you're going to convince people, is if you say, look, this is what I believe, and this is why I believe it, and this is why I'm doing what I'm doing, and I think it's helping make the world a better place. And if you can really do that, if you can be polite, you can talk to people of all different backgrounds and still be in their circles, and then they'll be more likely to think about their views.
I'd like to open it up to questions. If anyone has any, they could step up to the microphone over here. Cool. Looks like we've got one.
I see the groups of direct action as similar to the militias raised during the secession of the United States. And the common rally was around won battles. Do you see any battles that you can fight by direct action that might be one that people could rally around? Because it seems like defeat disperses crowds faster than anything.
I think Occupy was trying very hard to find that one issue that everyone got behind.
I don't really have a good answer to that because, you know, right now, sometimes I feel like activism in general, or sometimes it's like for here, especially for free staters, it's kind of like a shotgun effect where it's like a splatter across the wall, like just throwing stuff up and seeing what sticks. The Robin Hooding things definitely worked out well, especially for press coverage and whatnot. It's more like trial and error. I don't know what will work. I would love to see something work that got even more steam. But yeah, there needs to be an issue that someone really goes behind and pushes it forward. But yeah, I don't know. I really don't have a really good answer to it.
History is all in hindsight. People don't know what the biggest battles are going to be until they've won them. If you asked Rosa Parks if what she did would have really made a difference that day, maybe she wouldn't have thought it made a big impact, but later on you look at the battle and then you realize it was an important battle. So I think trying to recapture history in that way ignores that people will view what we did differently now, like 10 years from now, 20 years from now, than how we're viewing it. And what seems like an insurmountable struggle right now might be something that we are winning.
I guess the one that I can think of, like getting money and lobbyists out of government, like making government so it's more people. Like in New Hampshire, you can get into the House of Representatives, but unless you're retired and rich, it's much harder to get into the Senate. So even on a state level, that's really, really hard. And if we had a more representative government, those changes are a little bit easier in increments to make. So I mean, that's my focus right now. So.
I want to ask you a question about audience. So, some of our direct action, Robin Hooding, Occupy, these things have had worldwide audiences. Billions of people probably know about them. I don't know, maybe 1 billion people know about Robin Hooding. It's just so crazy how much that's blown up. So I want to, what is audience for you? Is it necessarily, is media maybe even more important than who's walking by the protest? I know, I threw an anti-Syria war protest the other week that only had 10, 15 people, but, WMUR showed up, so hey, that's thousands of people would see it. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, for me, I'm a little bit biased. I do a lot of media. For me, my real passion is to trigger the move. And my audience really is the Liberty community online, and try and convince them to move and show them what's going on here. So my audience really is people outside the state for the most part. I would like to focus more on people that live here, because I do live here. I haven't really figured out a good way to do it. I need to do more outreach toward people in that live here more. But I focus more on the people that I know would love living here and trying to get them to move. But again, that's kind of my audience.
Everybody I talk to, or that like sees me doing whatever. I don't really necessarily think of an audience per se, and I'm not good at measuring reach with media, which is, I guess, something that you would be able to measure a little bit better than me. So as far as my daily life, it's just people that can physically see me or hear me.
I'm not big on, I'm not a media professional either, but I'm really excited about the shift from traditional print media to online journalism and how that will impact the way people view the world in the next 50 years or so. I think movements that might not have gotten an audience and been able to break through a media blackout before will now be able to.
I think Occupy New Hampshire was a great example of when you get so many great activists and great media persons together, what can happen, because from the very first General Assembly, it was being live streamed, it was being filmed in HD. So I'd say that was a great thing, as far as if nobody's there to be the media, you do run the risk of some other outlet totally misrepresenting an event, misrepresenting an action. So in that sense, I'd say we've had success here anyway. Next question.
As far as furthering the cause and getting us closer to freedom, do you feel that there are forms of activism that are harmful to the movement and actually, cause more alienation, cause them to hate us more? And are there forms of activism that you wouldn't participate in because you might feel that way, that they cause more harm than good? And in hindsight, are there forms that you have done in the past that you regret having participated in?
I think violent activism is currently unfeasible in American society. There have definitely been historical situations where it's worked, like the Haitian slave rebellion, for example, when there weren't any other outlets. But in a culture like this one that's very, built on the idea that we're past violence, I think that type of activism is definitely not going to be effective.
For me, again, I'm not big on doing. For me, I don't want to get arrested. So like a lot of civil disobedience stuff, unless it's something I'm really gonna like care about, like I try to avoid doing. So for me, that's not what I really want to do that much. Though I will do it if I have to. Just like I don't like cop blocking. I can't stand it, actually, to be perfectly honest. However, I do it a lot of times because I feel like it's the right thing to do and it needs to be done. But I feel very uncomfortable doing it. It's not. I don't get any enjoyment doing it. I don't like them. It's not something I enjoy doing. But there's other activism I very much enjoy doing. Yeah, that's the kind of I wouldn't really participate in that much. It's not, again, but that's stuff you do and don't. But in regards to stuff that I think that isn't, you asked, do you think that there's activism that hurts? I don't know. I mean, there's some activism that does hurt the community. I mean, you get the argument that there's a lot of people that think a lot of stuff that happens in Keene hurts it. You know, especially people that like have lived in the community a long time. I've talked to like, the OG Free Staters that are here before like, the Keene thing even happened and whatnot. And like seriously, it's like there's different waves that come in and there's like different, cliques and groups and stuff like that. And for me, like all the media that came out, all the video of it, because it was showing that stuff was getting done, it inspired me and a bunch of other people to move here. And they don't understand that, like, they think it might hurt, like, relations in regards to people in the community and whatnot. But again, whenever you're doing anything here, if you're filming it, like, like any activism I do, and I kind of say this, and I probably shouldn't say it, but anything I do, it has two meanings. I do care about that issue, whether it's pot legalization or New Hampshire independence or whatever what I'm doing at the time or whatnot. I definitely do care about that. Cop blocking, I very much care about it. But I'm also going to tell people that I'm doing it. I'm trying to, document this so that other people come join, and those people are the people that signed that haven't moved yet.
You have a question, Christian?
Maybe I came a little late here, but I mean, not for the whole convention, but so I woke up in 2009 and I really did a lot of direct stuff. And now I kind of got burnt out on it, like stuff that I'm from Massachusetts, but don't boo me. Yeah, I'm trying to get up here, believe me. So I've been doing a lot of indirect stuff. Like I got my LTC in Mass, and I've been bringing people to my range, and that's my big thing now. And trying to get mostly women to get their license. And James Cleveland yesterday was like, "Yeah, I want to talk to him because he inspired me. Like, how can I get that goal across? It's in my mind, and no one's helping me. So I was just wondering, and I think the person before me kind of tapped. Was that you, Andrew? I think I don't know, but do you ever get burnt out and just try to do some indirect stuff? And I was going to talk to Ian Freeman, maybe next year you could have an indirect panel, things behind the scenes. I'm doing I'm helping my friend in Boston with the we had decrim in Mass, and then medical marijuana, and then 2016, I think we're going to try to go for legalization, maybe 2020, I'm not sure, but those are my indirect things I'm doing behind the scenes. So are you burnt out sometimes, and do you want to do indirect things?
Whenever I'm burnt out, I like to do fun activism, whether it's making a ballot crane or doing that thing we did during the primary where Vermin Supreme officiated a wedding with a human and a corporation. I think those types of things keep people's spirits up when they're burnt out. Just try to do something that's really fun and educational.
For me, from again my personal history, when I moved here, I was all gun ho. I'm let's just change the world today. We can do this, hoorah, and go everywhere and do everything I can and whatnot. And I saw I saw that I was going to get burnt out relatively quickly if I didn't change how I was acting and whatnot. And at the same time, we always talk about how we want to live free, and I didn't want to wait to live free either. So I incorporate, don't get me wrong, I do activism. I work full-time job. I do a show once a week. I try to do at least an hour of activism. I limit myself, besides doing a show or whatnot, I try to do 1 hour, whether it's jury nullification outreach, whether it's cop blocking or something like that. I set aside a small amount of time that I'm going to do. I want to spend this morning. I want to go out in the cold. I want to hand out jury nullification flyers to possible jurors or something like that. Just to have something going on, but I'm not going to do every day have something going on. I reach my balance of how much I'm going to do throughout the week, but I always have something going on in my life because at the same time, I think I counterbalance burning out because I try to encompass every part of my day with living as much as possible and living an adventure, and I do that to compensate for the fact that I could feel like I'm burning out doing activism.
Our friend Cecilia likens any sort of change to oceans, there's an ebb and flow, and that's really important. And I would say just taking a break, part of living free is go walk in the mountains for 3 days. Just stop thinking about it, because sometimes your body gets so overloaded if you're really active in these things that you just have to take a step away, and that is indirect action because you're ensuring that your body and your mind are going to be able to sustain whatever you're working on. So
to add to that is you don't want to, if you're fighting for freedom, You want something to fight for. And if your entire life is doing nothing but this, you have nothing, you're not fighting for yourself, and you have to fight for yourself first and foremost, but you have to have memories and a life that you want to hold on to. If you're just doing all this, yeah, you're having fun and doing all this, but you gotta do you, and you have to be you before you can have a passion to protect you.
I will not be part of your revolution if there is no dancing. Emma Goldman.
That was great last night. We're running out of time. We're digging into lunch. Do you guys want to give final thoughts and wrap it up?
Yeah, I guess if you guys have anything you'd like to add.
I just want to reiterate: just do what you're passionate about. Again, that's the top thing. Don't try and change the world on every issue that you care about. Pick something that you're passionate about and focus your energy on that. You don't have to be a jack of all trades on everything that you're doing. Pick something that you're passionate about and work toward fulfilling that and make that your goal.
My final thought is I just want to thank this community for being so welcoming and inclusive of me, even though I have different views than a lot of you. I find that really heartwarming. Thank you.
Yeah, just thank you for having us, and thank you, Garret, for inviting us to speak.
I'm glad all our panelists were able to come out here and share such wonderful stories with us from their past activities. And I'm looking forward to hearing what they have to do in the future, as well as everyone else here. Thank you.
We'd like to invite you to visit freekeene.com. Freekeene.com features audio, video, and blogs chronicling the transition to a voluntary society. Freekeene.com also has comments and discussion forums so you can be heard. Freekeene.com.
I should be in Keene, New Hampshire with the Free Staters.